you're anything like I was when I first moved here, the number one thing stressing you out is probably finding a place to live. And that huge flashing neon question sign in your head is definitely saying, how much rent is actually reasonable in Japan? It is totally normal to feel lost. When you're an outsider, you don't have that local knowledge of the average market prices. The cost of living feels like a total mystery, and you're just paralyzed by uncertainty. But today, we're ending that anxiety. I've done the homework for you. So first, let's start with one of the most common rules you'll hear in Japan about rent. People often say, your rent should be about 1/3 of your take-home income. And honestly, it's not a bad guideline. If you go much higher than that, you end up with less money for food, transportation, fun, and savings. Basically, life gets tight pretty fast. Now, one thing to be careful about is the word take-home income. It sounds complicated, but it's really simple. It's just the money that actually lands in your bank account after taxes and social insurance are deducted. In Japan, you can't plan your life based on your gross salary because the difference is pretty big, so always calculate based on take-home pay. And of course, that 1/3 rule is just a general guide. If you want to save more or prepare for unexpected expenses, it's totally okay to aim lower, like 20 to 25% instead. Let me give you a quick example. If your take-home pay is 150,000 yen, the target rent is around 45,000 yen. If you take home 200,000 yen, then 60,000 yen makes sense. And if you make 250,000 yen, about 75,000 yen is the guideline. Once your rent goes over that level, it starts eating into your lifestyle and you lose the freedom to enjoy life in Japan. So be careful not to let your entire life revolve around rent. Next, here's another super important point. Figure out your living expenses before choosing your rent budget. A lot of people mess up by looking only at the rent price and totally forgetting the monthly costs that come afterward. Think about food, utilities, phone bills, transportation, entertainment, going out with friends. Once you add everything up, the total can be pretty surprising. According to recent household data, a person living alone in Japan spends around 40,000 yen on food, about 9,000 yen on utilities, and around 23,000 yen on communication and transportation. If you add entertainment and social expenses, you could easily hit 160,000 yen a month. So if your take-home pay is 250,000 yen, you end up with around 90,000 yen left for rent and savings. That's why the smartest way to set your rent is first check your take-home pay, then calculate your living costs, and then decide on a realistic rent limit based on what's left. Try to leave some room in your budget, because in Japan, unexpected costs pop up a lot. And don't forget, seasonal changes. Your utility bill jumps in winter with heating and again in summer with air conditioning. When you keep these seasonal changes in mind, managing your monthly budget becomes much easier. Now, let's talk about the different factors that affect rent. There are 3 points. The first one is regional differences. Rent varies massively depending on where you live. Tokyo's central areas are extremely expensive, but in regional cities, you can get a much bigger place for the same price. Places close to the station are always more expensive, and moving even a few minutes farther can bring the rent down a lot. So once you pick an area, check the average rent and see where your budget fits. If it doesn't fit, adjust your expectations. Distance from the station, room size, or the age of the building. The second factor is company housing allowances. Some companies cover part of your rent, either as a percentage or up to a certain amount. But be careful, don't rely on that too heavily. Company policies can change, so make sure your rent is still manageable even without the allowance. The third factor is renewal fees. In Japan, most rental contracts are for 2 years, and when you renew, there's often a renewal fee equal to half a month or even 1 full month of rent. Some places don't have renewal fees, but the monthly rent is usually a bit higher. If you plan to stay long-term, compare these costs so you don't get surprised later. Now, how can you actually keep your rent within your ideal budget? Here are some practical strategies. There are 5 strategies. Number 1, reduce the number of conditions you're picky about. If you want to be close to the station, in a new building, with a big layout, your rent will skyrocket. Know what you can compromise on. Number 2, think about sharing. Splitting rent and utilities with someone else can drastically reduce your costs. Just make sure you choose someone reliable and set some rules. Number 3, older buildings or wooden structures tend to have lower rent, especially on the first floor. It may not look brand new, but if it meets your needs, it's often a great deal, even if the place isn't super close to the station or equipped with the newest features. It can still be perfectly comfortable as long as it meets your basic needs. Number 4, save money on furniture. Buying everything brand new in Japan can get expensive fast, so consider rentals or second-hand items. Reducing your initial spending takes pressure off your monthly rent budget. Number 5, review your utility and internet plans. Simply reviewing your electricity provider or your phone and internet plans can save you a few thousand yen every month. So it's worth considering alongside your rent. For example, the plans you've been on for years without changing might not actually match the way you use electricity, internet, or your phone, which means you could be paying more than you really need to. With your electricity plan, simply lowering your contracted amperage or switching to a plan that gives you cheaper rates at night can surprisingly save you quite a bit. And for your phone or internet, just reviewing how much data you use and when you use it, and then adjusting your plan to fit your actual usage, can significantly reduce your monthly bills by making these small but smart adjustments. You can make balancing rent and living expenses much easier, and even start saving money without feeling any extra pressure. It might feel a little troublesome at first, but once you take the time to review your plans, you'll start to notice how much more breathing room you have in your monthly budget. Now that we've gone over the 5 strategies for keeping your rent under control, let's look at some real examples to help you picture what this actually looks like. If you take home 200,000 yen a month and you live alone, a realistic rent is around 70,000 yen, leaving you 130,000 yen for living expenses and savings. If 2 people live together and their combined take-home pay is 400,000 yen, then 120,000 yen rent means only 60,000 yen per person. That's why living with someone or sharing a place can give you way more financial freedom. So today we talked about how to calculate rent based on take-home income, how living costs and regional differences affect your budget, and what you can do to keep rent under control. The biggest takeaway is this. First, 1/3 of your take-home pay is a guideline, but the real key is knowing your living expenses and doing the math honestly. Second, check for regional differences and company housing allowances. Then set your priorities and find where you're willing to compromise. And third, these 5 methods are the most effective ways to keep your rent down. And don't forget the 5 strategies. Adjust your priorities. Consider sharing. Choose older buildings. Save on furniture. And compare your utility plans. There's a lot of information packed into these strategies, but even knowing just a few of them can make a noticeable difference in how much you end up paying for rent. So keep these tips in mind as you plan your budget. Thanks so much for watching up to this point. On mooovin, you can search for apartments in Japan from anywhere in the world. We offer support in Japanese, English, Chinese, and Vietnamese. So be sure to check out our official website from the link in the description. If you thought this video was helpful or interesting, please subscribe and hit the like button. Well then, see you in the next video. I'm cheering with all my heart for your happy life in Japan. Bye bye.